Tēnā te whānau, welcome along to another episode of No Boundaries. I'm Laura McGoldrick, very lucky to be joined today by two very fine cricket gentlemen. Mike Hesson streaming in from Dunedin on a beautiful, sunny 12-degree day, and Scott Storris is joining us in his chair. He can't work his chair, so he's a lot shorter than me, which I'm really enjoying. Gentlemen, firstly, Scotty, welcome. Thanks for coming into the studio. Who would have thought we'd be here talking about New Zealand whitewashing India? 3-0, they take the series. Hess wasn't as optimistic. He tapered expectation when I said, could we get a 3-0 win over there? How are you feeling about it, Scotty? You've played a lot of cricket in India. It's a big deal.
Well, add me to that list. I didn't think that New Zealand was going to win one. I was delighted when they did win one. I thought they were going to crash and burn after that, still not celebrating in a physical sense, but just mentally. So that almost is the most pleasing thing for me, was the mental discipline and drive of that side to go on and win games too, and then even once they've won the series, to then back it up with another quality performance. I think that that side and Gary Stead and his management group deserve a lot of credit for that, because there was a real let's put our foot on their throats and put them under huge pressure off the field. And if you're a fan of X or Twitter, those Indian players are copping it right now.
They certainly are. The birthday boy, Mike Hesson. When we look at the scores, though, they won by 25 runs, 113 runs, 8 wickets. They didn't just win; they beat them. They beat them properly. You know what I mean? So, when you look at this, and you've spent a lot of time in India yourself, and you've been in the role of coach of the Black Caps. I don't know if everyone maybe appreciates the magnitude of what this team was able to do over in India.
Well, I think as Scotty said, even just winning one test in India puts you above any other New Zealand side for such a long time. And India have been quite rightly ranked number one in the world for basically 10 years, almost. Since Australia had their period, India's pretty much been the top of the pop since then, certainly at home. And they've lost one series in 20 years at home. So to win a test match, that first one, we understood that. It was in Bangalore, the ball bounced, it nipped around. We could understand competing in those conditions. But then you get to Pune, and then you get to Mumbai, where conditions very much suit India. New Zealand won 2 tosses. They batted first in both of those games. But that certainly didn't guarantee a win. But it gave them a little bit of a head up, a step up. But to win those games against a bowling attack like India has in their home conditions, and New Zealand to bat as well as they did and out-bat India in those own conditions, was extraordinary. And, I think it quite rightly should go down as New Zealand's best ever series win.
It's going to be a very interesting Hellberg cycle this time around with the Olympics and now what the Black Caps have done, of course, the White Ferns. If you look at the series, was the first for Tom Latham to be in charge as captain. What did you make of his role, what he did, how he worked as bowler, especially in the last couple of tests?
Well, I was finishing up when Tom was coming through. He was only a 19, 20-year-old at that time. You could already tell that there was a maturity about him and the way he carries himself. He's got a very good cricket IQ, a cricket brain, if you like. And I thought he did a terrific job as captain. I thought he made the changes at the right time. He managed to ensure that when the game teetered at 50-50, that they then won that next crucial moment. I think, again, like he said, he deserves a lot of credit for this. His batting form has been a little off for a while until that last match, but he didn't let that affect him whatsoever. It was all about his leadership, and I think he will do a very good job in the next few years. I
think you're right, Hess, and if we look at other people that performed, AUS Patel really does like Mumbai. Wankhede is one of his favourite places in the world, I think. He was superb, having had a slightly quieter start to the series, then he came in like he did there. What did you make of his performance? Probably the bowling unit I'll ask you about, because Ish Sodhi playing in that last test. What did you think? I thought there were some comments on X Twitter, as you said, about how late that Tom brought Ish in to bowl at points. What did you make of all that?
Look, I thought Tom was really clever. Rachin bowled that last over to Virat Kohli on day 2, and that was the clincher. That was very much a matchup. Let's not give Virat Kohli an off spinner or a leg spinner to face. Let's give him another left arm spinner, because Ajaz had obviously bowled the over at the other end, and Virat was keen to get off strike. He's got that in the back of his head. It's become a little bit of an issue. So I think that was a really smart move from Tom. That obviously meant that Ish, basically didn't bowl until the next day, which was fine. He was better when the ball was a little bit older, and to be fair, Ajaz, that pitch suits his pace. You know, he operates around that sort of high 70s, early 80s, and when it does and it still grips, then he's as good as there is going around. And he had to step up. You know, with Mitchell Sattner not playing in that game, obviously Glenn Phillips did an admirable role. You know, he took 8 wickets in that series, off-bowled a lot to the left-handers, and they bowled in tandem, whether it be Sattner or Ajaz. And the seamers did their job when they had to. You know, they were, you know, obsolete, I guess, or, you know, not required in the second or the third test for large portions of it. But Matt Henry kept picking up a wicket early. Tim Southey did. He got Rohit Sharma a couple of times, which were big wickets early in the series. So they did enough. And when conditions suited, obviously Will O'Rourke was a real handful at Bengaluru when the ball bounced and seamed. So all in all, just a really good performance. And New Zealand, we don't often say that, you know, we out-bowl opposition from a spin bowling perspective, but we had 3 or 4 very good spinners on show during the series.
Yeah, I think it's important to note too that not all spinners are created equally. I mean, certain pitches, the finger spinners in particular, which New Zealand predominantly used, sometimes the undercutting ball is the one that turns more rather than a real Daniel Vettori style drop and loop and bounce. And I think that's again credit to Tom Latham to identify what style of bowling and use those spinners who utilise that type of delivery. From Ish Sodhi, in his own personal perspective and all my experience, if the captain doesn't come to you that often, he doesn't quite have the faith in you to be able to perform a role. And you often see that when they bowl one spell, it doesn't quite go, and everyone has a bad spell, but he won't give you the ball back for a while. The ones he has faith and trust in, he'll come back to pretty quickly and let them start again. So personally for Ish, yeah, a little bit of a problem, I guess, from the trust perspective from Tom Latham, but I thought I'm with Hess. The spinners identified the conditions, whether it's those undercutters, whether it's the time to drop and loop and try and beat the batsman in flight, and they got all those decision-making decisions correct.
They certainly did, and just off the back of what he said about Glenn Phillips, I mean, what an extraordinary cricketer. He's worked so hard on his bowling, so for him to take those 8 wickets over there was huge, and you know how much it will mean to him. And you could see from all of the comments from the team afterwards how much the whole series meant to them, and maybe at some points they were a little surprised, you know, as well. But if we look at India and how they performed, their batting, Hess, when you are going over to Australia, and that is huge for them this series, obviously the Border-Gavaskar series, which is coming up in 3 or 4 weeks. What are they going to do?
Well, I think they'll be pretty happy to get away from turning wickets, to be brutally honest, from a batting perspective, because that was the surprising thing for me is how poorly they played spin. And, you know, we know history suggests they haven't been brilliant. It's just their bowlers have been better than the opposition's. But there was some really soft dismissals in this series. And often guys trying to sweep that don't sweep. You know, players just premeditating and charging down the wicket. You know, there was just some dismissals that you look and go, well, that's just not what you expect from those world-class players. So maybe heading to Australia, I know they're going to be at Perth, and that's going to be quick and bouncy, so that will be a challenge in itself. But they'll be down on confidence.
Yeah, I think...
And Rohit Sharma missing the first test. Sorry, Scotty, if he misses the first test, they're also going to miss that leadership as well, which I think will be huge.
I think as well, New Zealand's given Australia the blueprint on how to beat this Indian side. The thing that stood out for me was the lack of patience from that Indian top order in particular. They wanted to move the game along, whether they're swept up in this whole Bazball thing and we have to score at 4.5, I don't know. But what we saw was a hangover of T20 cricket. They spent so much time playing and going after the bowling that if you were disciplined in your line and lengths, whether it be fast bowling or spinners, then I think they will lose patience and they'll provide you with opportunities. We know what Australia does better than anyone, and that is they're just robotic-like and they do not give you much to score. So India, I think, for their improvement in that series, they simply have to find a way to not just simply block and go all Pujara or Rahul Dravid-like, but make sure that they force the opposition to actually get them out. Hess is right. They actually got themselves out a lot, and that came through a lack of patience.
Yeah, it was interesting. There was that I'm trying to think, was it maybe the third day of that last test where they really started to go for it? Jaiswal started to really have a crack. And, Pant is an interesting player and one that, I remember him going out in the 90s last time he was in Australia. This is an important series for him because he really should have, could have, would have. That was that slightly controversial decision, well, according to Twitter. And actually, some of the commentators, I think, were a bit shocked when with the LBW where his bat and pad was and the little... what's that?
Spike.
That little spike.
The inside edge?
Yeah. Was it him in the back? Yeah, that one. And it is, how big a series is this Australian series for Rishabh Pant?
Well, I think he's the type of player that regardless of the situation, he just plays one way. Scotty's alluded to the top order, the lack of patience. And he's absolutely spot on. Whereas Rishabh Pant is that guy, he's the Adam Gilchrist type of player that can come out and, even if you're in trouble, he can turn the game on its head. If you're on top, he can actually take the game away from your opposition. So I think he has to continue to play that same way. He also doesn't back his defensive screen. So therefore, he loves the little reverse lap over the slips, or he's getting inside the line, or whatever it is, banging one down the ground. Like he's that X factor player, but he needs the other players to do their job to help him play his. So he needs your Virat Kohlis, he needs your Rohit Sharmas. Your Jaiswal will be a real challenge for him with that extra bounce, because that's where he's got undone at times, is that short ball. And Shubman Gill, and I know Scotty's a huge fan of Shubman Gill. I think he's going to be a critical player for me because he looks like he plays pace really well, and I don't think he'll get flustered by the short ball, but he's going to have to adapt to those Australian conditions really quickly.
Yeah, they've started talking about Rishabh Pant in the same breath as Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli in India at the moment, and he's had success in Australia before. And so he's probably the one player who doesn't have anything to prove when he goes there. Totally agree, he's got a specific role to play in that lower middle order, especially as a left-hander. But Hess and I being in India for the IPL, coming back from 400 odd days or 600 days or whatever it was with his leg injury, there were a couple of chinks in the armour. One, his feet weren't really moving, he couldn't hit with any power outside off stump, and the short ball troubled him, which is not a great combination when you go to bouncy wickets in Australia. So the more he plays, that will come back to him because of that was that layoff. But he is a crucial player for them in that role. But can he get back to mastering those conditions when he perhaps doesn't move quite as well as he used to?
Well, the Indian team are going to need him to over there. The Indian team aren't the only one with this series coming up. We've obviously got England at home, Bazball. We're going to face that head on, which will be interesting. But when you look at this New Zealand team now, so Will Young obviously taking our player of the series with what he did with the bat, and he probably wouldn't have played if Kane Williams had been over there. Does he fit in this test team that's going to take on England in a few short weeks? Well,
firstly, I think that the New Zealand golf courses will make a bit of money on this tour from the English being here. They seem to spend as much time on the golf course as they do at training. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I've been trying to figure that out in my own mind on the way here to the studio, and I'm not sure where he can fit in. That's the weird thing. If Kane comes back, does he suddenly put Daryl Mitchell under pressure? But Daryl Mitchell's been very good for a couple of years. Tom Latham's now the captain. I don't think he can walk in front of Devon Conway, even though he's had a lean 12 months in this series. He got New Zealand off to good starts. So I think, unfortunately, most eras with our side, he would be in that starting side. But at the moment, I can't see a spot for him.
It is a bit of a pickle that you find yourselves in. Daryl Mitchell, we talked about, we had Simon Doull on the show last week, and he talked about, being in India and making that big IPL money last time round. Perhaps he was just searching just a little too much this series, but he did come away with a good score in that last test, Hess. What did you make of our batters, and what would your team look like? Could you find a place in yours for Will Young?
Not unless there's an injury, to be fair. I think that that top 6 or 7 is pretty well settled. I mean, I was actually really pleased that Mitchell stood up in that last test match, and his decision-making was significantly better than it had been in the first 2 tests. He looked quite clouded and cluttered in his thinking, and he was, premeditating a lot of shots, whereas I thought he was really clear in his head. His decision-making was clear. He got beaten on the outside edge, which was fine many times, and he didn't follow it. So I just thought he held that middle lower order together well, which he has done in other conditions around the world as well. So he certainly is going to stay in that side. Rutchin, top run scorer, he's not moving. Obviously, we know all about Kane. And as we said, the 2 openers, although Tom hasn't been in vintage form, it's hard to find a slot. And to be honest, if we look back to Australia when they were the best in the world, there was a lot of good players sitting out. Stuart Law, comes to mind. Guys that scored a huge amount of runs. Michael Hussey missed out a lot. So unfortunately, the sign of a good team and a strong squad is that good players are missing out. And unfortunately, it could well be Will Young. But the other side is we've also had a truckload of injuries to our batting group. Devon's been injured a lot. Kane's been injured a lot. So, hey, you never know. And we know that Will Young will be ready to go if required.
Absolutely, he will. Mitchell Santner, his performance, a good ND boy. Scott Styris. Does that performance over there now make him your top spinner in New Zealand? Because we've struggled to find a place for him in the Test side for a little bit. He's been in and out a couple of times. I very distinctly remember him bowling incredibly well at Bay Oval against Pakistan to actually get us into that World Test Championship final when we won. So he has been there or thereabouts, but this was his most significant performance. We've talked about that to date. So where does he sit for you now in that Test setup? Well,
another question that you posed on the way here that I struggled with finding an answer for. Again, I say no. I sort of say no because if he is New Zealand's best spinner, then I think, yes, he gets into that side. If he's not, then the answer is no. The beauty of the side, New Zealand's always had that batting all-rounder, but they've been the seamers. Now they've got two spinners already with Rachin Ravindra, Glenn Phillips with the way he performed. So do you need another? I'm not sure Santner's batting at 8 can be relied on. He hasn't, no, he has 100 and 450s, but it's not like he's a Ravichandran Ashwin who's 600s, batting at number 8 and gives you that extra option. So I would still pick our best spinner. If it is Santner, then he plays. But if it's Ajaz Patel, then I would play him instead because of the fact we already have those other spinners in the weight who can bowl some overs. New Zealand conditions, typically spinners haven't done that well, so maybe they're going with the 4 fast bowlers with the 2 spinners that are already in that batting unit.
How will the team deal with the idea of Bazball? How will the team, do you think, respond to Bazball? There's been so much hype around it, so much talk around it. And Baz is now at home with his team. How do you think New Zealand deals with that, Hez?
Well, we did have the series, didn't we, a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, where Neil Wagner got that wicket towards the back end. So, we've had a wee taste of it. We obviously played them in England, where they won some 4th innings chases where they took us down. So we'll be well prepared for that. I think the balance of our bowling attack is, with Will O'Rourke there, I think we've got a few more bases covered. I think Matt Henry's bowling beautifully at the moment. Tim Southey in New Zealand conditions, he's probably going to have to do that donkey work. If they don't play someone like Santner, then for me, you can almost play a bowling all-rounder, a seam bowling all-rounder at 8. I just don't think on those New Zealand surfaces that we need to play a frontline spinner when you've got Phillips and Rachin. That's it. He's probably one of our better players, isn't he? Once you got those two in your 11, I don't see a role for a frontline spinner. I mean, they very rarely even bowl in the first innings of a match in New Zealand over the last 10 years, and when they have, it's a token over before tea. So. You've already got 2 spinners who are more than capable. If you get to the Bay Oval, maybe you might choose your best spinner, and that'll be an interesting choice. For me, I'd go Santner just because he offers 3-dimensional and he's high on confidence, and Ajaz bowls a different pace in New Zealand that I don't think is as suited to the conditions we have here.
What about Nathan Smith? So Nathan Smith is someone that Hes has talked about a lot. He's about to make his debut, potentially could make his debut over in Sri Lanka at the one-day series. Is he someone that you could see a place for in this Test series, potentially, if things go well for him in Sri Lanka? Yeah,
he's been talked about for a while, and at some stage you have to give him an opportunity. And I think now is probably it. Certainly in New Zealand conditions, we've all, think back previously, Colin de Gronholm did that similar role, 4th seamer, bat at 7. I don't think he is Colin de Gronholm with the bat, so at 8, I think that's probably a good spot for him. But some of these players you've just got to bring in and give them an opportunity. In a perfect world, it would be a Sri Lanka or Bangladesh in Pakistan in New Zealand conditions. But away you go, have a go. New Zealand needs to find more depth, particularly around their fast bowlers. I'd love to see him get that chance.
All right, so if you would too, Hes is a big fan of Nathan Smith. You've been asking for this for a while.
Oh, look, he swings the ball from wide of the crease as he can bat at 8. It gives you the balance that you need in New Zealand when de Gronholm left options, and he's a competitor. So I like him.
If we were to look at this victory for New Zealand in this series, is this the greatest achievement that this team has had to date, do you think? I know we've won the World Test Championship, all good stuff, but this is in India, 3-0, significant wins.
Yeah, without question. I don't think there's anything that comes close. I've been asked that question a lot over the last 48, 72 hours, and in some ways I think it's almost like Scotland touring New Zealand and beating the All Blacks in a 3-match test series away. And I don't think it'll ever happen. So that's what we would have thought as well when New Zealand cricket side went to India. It'll never happen that they clean sweep India, especially as Hess pointed out, 20 years of not being beaten. If teams win a game, they'll win one test and one test only. So for this team to come in, I think everybody, certainly in the cricket world, is just loving the fact that New Zealand's gone there and done what many thought was impossible.
How do we taper expectations for this team? Because they've had a bit of a lean trot really in tests in the last 12, 18 months, and then to come away with this amazing series victory, and then we come back to New Zealand and you've got England, which is an interesting challenge in itself. How do you, as a cricket fan, what are we thinking now? We're like, okay, well, don't worry about England. We've got that. How do you, I don't know, how do you understand what's just happened, Des?
Well, I guess my method of tapering expectations seems to work nicely the last 2 or 3 weeks. So, and that's kind of, like, the reality is you can't actually take any team in international cricket for granted. And we know the way England play, that is a little bit rocks or diamonds, you know, in terms of they can come out and score 450 in a day and make you look toothless from a bowling attack. But they can also get rock and roll for 150 if you get it right and the ball nibbles around a little bit. So I think that, you know, New Zealand has the experience to really compete with England, but conditions also suit England as well. So, you know, it's one of those test series that I think will be very evenly matched. You know, Joe Root's obviously in tremendous form, and he's going to be a huge wicket for New Zealand. To me, Wokes is a key. You know, Wokes hasn't really gone well with the Kookaburra ball, and he's going to be leading their attack. So it's whether he can actually stand up over here and lead that attack. If he can't, I can see us getting some big scores against that attack. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't take anything for granted. Just because we've done so well in India doesn't mean it's going to flow on automatically to this next series, but it's going to be a heck of a series.
Yeah, I also think that the strategy employed by Tom Latham was perfect in India, especially if England now come out and try and play that aggressive nature. What we saw in India was a lot of in-out fields. Men on the boundary, men around the bat. And what that did is took away that aggressive aspect, because there were fieldsmen out. If they were to make a mistake, then they were out, because we used to do it with Matthew Hayden as well. Long on straight away to Daniel Vittori. His ego was such that he wanted to put it over his head. Eventually it would lead to his dismissal. Now I think it'll be the same with England. There'll be men back to protect those big shots, but you'll also see the catches not around the bat, of course, but in the slip cordon and in the gully positions. So if New Zealand are to win, I think they need to use the ego that England will try and, I guess, bully the New Zealand bowling lineup and use that to your advantage.
I did see today the Barmy Army posted that Jimmy Anderson has put himself in the IPL mega auction. And I just wondered, Scott, would you put yourself in as well if he's put it? Because you're about the same age, aren't you?
Yeah. I don't need the money though, so the answer's no.
Perfect. When we talk about, so we've got England and then India obviously to Australia. Will Australia be sending us some sort of thank you card though to send a now wounded India over there to what arguably is the series of the summer that everyone has been looking forward to? How are Australia feeling right now?
In all honesty, I'm not even sure Australia knew we were playing in India. They just live in their own little bubble. They really don't seem to take a lot of notice of other stuff going around the world. So, yeah, we might have to send a few of them a postcard just to let them know the result. But they will be thinking they're going to bully India, and that's the way they like to. In their home conditions, they are relentless, as Scotty alluded to with the ball. But they will bully India, or certainly try to, and that's why India need to sort of come up with a bit of a counter once they can absorb some pressure. So, I actually think it's going to be a far better series than what you would think following what New Zealand have just done. And I think Virat Kohli against that pace will thrive. You know, he's obviously come off a really tough series, but I would expect him to stand up and lead that batting lineup.
Yes, India still celebrate when they went there a few years ago and won the series. Yeah. That was almost like their version of what we've just done. in India. So I think Australia were looking for revenge no matter what. The fact that they're coming in having lost that series won't change anything. They know that they need to sort of get that mana back, if you like, against India in their home conditions, and they'll be looking for blood as well.
We've got some very exciting cricket series coming up, that is for sure. Mike Hesson, Scott Starks, I want to thank you guys so much for your thoughts today. A huge congratulations to the Black Caps. We loved it. It was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on No Boundaries. We'll see you next time.